Hi, welcome back to my channel. I'm Abhishek, your host. In today's video, we're going to talk about the initial margin requirement and the maintenance margin requirement, also sometimes called as the variation margin requirement or account. The only difference being that the variation margin account is being held between the exchange and that of the floor broker, while when we are talking about the maintenance margin, that's got more to do with between the broker and the trader. So as you all might be knowing that, let's say when we have to buy a particular security, let's say stock security, we are being provided a certain leverage. So the idea is that, let's say we have a $10 stock and we wanted to purchase 100 units of which amounting to $1,000. So on day zero, if we place the order, uh, our account will be debited to the tune of $200. Understanding, with the tacit understanding that by T plus 2 days, the day when delivery actually takes place, or our demat account, as we call it in India, is being credited with with the security, I'll be paying the rest $800. The similar concept is also extended in case of derivatives contract, mostly the ones that are mark to market, for example, futures. Okay. So in case of futures also, there is a concept called mark to market. So let's say when we have to initiate a particular contract, we post a certain base margin, which is called the initial margin. And then based upon the daily movement of the futures in the exchange, we also maintain an account which is called as the maintenance margin account or the variation margin account. Now, based upon that movement, either there is a call on the maintenance margin account or there is a crediting to the variation margin account. So that's how things move. And then in your exam, you will be faced with problems related to the IMR and MMR. Now, I see a lot of people actually getting confused for no good reason, because this is fairly a new, it's fairly a very simple concept. But I think, the way the book explains that perhaps could be bettered. And with that view itself, I think I can draw an analogy which will make our understanding much easier. So what we will do is that we will take this analogy, and then after I have explained the whole stuff, we will solve a few problems in order to get home the point. So to begin with, let's say we are talking about a village, and that village has a water tank, right? This is a big water tank, and this water tank caters to the need of the village itself. Okay. Now, this water tank, oops, this water tank is being uh, uh, okay, so it's being filled every week once, when the water tanker comes, and then they pump the water from the ground below the water tank, and subsequently the water tank is refilled up to the brim. All right, so let's imagine that this is the brim of the particular tank, and there is obviously a sensor, and the sensor would mean that if it touches the brim, of course the water supply has to be disconnected immediately, so that water does not spill out. And then there are going to be regular consumption of water by the villagers. However, there is also something called as the safety level mark, and that safety level mark is just above the um, this tap around here from which water is discharged. So now let's rename this safety level, this initial level at which the water is filled to the brim. Let's call that level the IMR. Okay, let's call that level as IMR. Okay, and then this level at which the safety level which we had initially talked about, because if water reaches this level, there is immediately a call, and the tanker comes in, or the ground engineers, they come in and they pump the water back to this particular overhead tank. So let's call this particular depth of water, this body of water, as the MMR or MMR level. So the idea is that once it is filled up to the brim, it will cater to the water requirement of the neighborhood. But as and when water gets depleted because of daily consumption, there will reach a safety level. And once the safety level is touched, there has to be a call on the water suppliers to refill back the water column in the tank up to the brim. Okay, so this is the understanding. Exactly the same thing happens with our futures contract in an exchange. So how it works out, let's just see. Let's take an example directly in order to understand that. So we have the first example that we have in front of us is that Brian Thomas, FRM, is a junior portfolio risk analyst with the Crystal Securities. He is mandated to manage the firm's daily settlement limits for the long futures position. All right. The futures contract is written on Delma Corporation with a multiplier of 100. Each contract is priced at $1,200. Crystal has 50 such open contracts. What is the contract value? All right. And the base margin required to establish the contract, which is also called as the initial margin, is set at 60,000 US dollar, and the maintenance margin is set at 40,000 US dollar. And then there are three price movements on three successive dates are being given, wherein the underlying security moves moves to $125, $126, and $110. Assuming the variation margin account can equally be credited and debited, what should be the account balance after day 3? Okay, so this is the problem in front of us. So let's just first understand, as the given thing is. So we say, so we say that we have to find out the contract value. So the contract value is very simple. It's going to be the multiplier effect. So which is basically we have each contract is priced at 1200. So 1200 is the base price into multiplier, which is 100, into the 50 such open contracts. So if you do this math, this comes out to be, I think, 600,000. 1200 into 50 into 100. So this comes out to be 6. Okay, so this comes out to be 6 million. So this is 6 million, or to be very precise, put it in other words, it's okay. So this is the first part of our question, which is fairly easy. Now, next it says that we have the contract margin, the initial margin requirement. So that's around 60,000. So let's draw the water tank here. And what it says is that this is water tank, this is the maintenance margin. So, and then this is filled up to this level. And this total amount is 60,000. 60,000, right? And which is also called as the IMR. And this level is at 40,000, which is also called the MMR, or the maintenance margin requirement. All right. Now we have to find out that if the underlying has a price of 125 on day 1, what would be the what would be the variation to the maintenance margin account, or the initial margin account. So let's understand one thing. If I'm long to the contract, but obvious that if the price of the security, of the underlying security, is going up, because of which the futures price will also go up beyond the strike price, the value of the futures contract actually will increase, and that's a plus sign as far as the long to the contract is concerned. So if long is winning this contract, there is no need for long to actually to have any margin call. There will not be any margin call. In fact, the margin call will be to the short to the contract. Now, from here, we can find out that because of a multiplier of 100 and 1200 being one contract size, so the price of the underlying out here is basically what we're talking about is it's 120. Yeah, it should have been. It should, yeah. So it's basically the multiplier happens to be 10. Yeah, so it's no, it's okay. Yes, it's 1200 divided by 100. So this is 10. This is 12. Yeah, so the price happens to be 12. So there is a decimal that has been missed out here. It's 12.5, 12.6, and 11. All right. So we understood that the price of the security at which the strike price of the security at which the contract has been actually valued upon has the security price at 12. All right. Now the thing is that if on day one, if the price becomes 12.5, that means that there is a credit to the longs account at the rate of 50 cents or half a dollar. And then for how many such shares? So there has been a crediting, the long is now winning, and hence this becomes 0.5 per share multiplied by 100 into 50 such contracts. So there is an immediate crediting of 0.5 into 100 into 0.5 into 0.5 into 100 into 50. So there is a crediting of $2,500. All right. Now this is the extra. So it's like, you know, you have filled it to the brim. Now whatever be the excess water out here, so that is being collected separately in a jar for the rainy for emergency, as part of the emergency reserve. So you could imagine that this $2,500 is being credited to the longs account because long is winning in this case. So the day after that, it now becomes 12.6. So again, in this particular day, the long is winning. So now the long is at, it is going to be credited as 0.6 into 100 into 50. So which comes out to be, let's say, 0.6 into 100, sorry, 0.6 into 100 into 50. So that becomes $3,000. Right. So in day two, this 3,000 extra dollar, in addition to the first day's $2,500, is going to be credited to the longs account. So if you consider the day one and day two put together, initially the margin was around 60,000, and plus, because of this favorable movement in the futures value from the longs perspective, this account now, including the initial margin account plus the variation margin account or the maintenance margin account put together, is now standing somewhere around 65,500 US dollar. Okay. Now what happens on day three? Now on day three, the price has dropped to $11. So if it has dropped to $11, there is an immediate loss of from this 12.6. So there's an immediate loss of $1.6. So $1.6 multiplied by 100 multiplied by 50. So if you do this math, so it comes out to be 1.6 into 100 into 50. So which is $8,000. So now this account, because of this depreciation of the underlying, this account is going to be debited by $8,000. So if you debited $8,000 to the 65,500, the balance amount at the end of the 3-day trading window comes out to be $57,500. All right. Now, so let's say with the analogy that we are talking about. So initially, what we say that because at the end of the day, and then the second day, this account has a positive credit balance of the initial intact 60,000 IMR initial margin, plus now because of the crediting of another 5,500 bucks. But subsequently on day 3, because there has been a depreciation, there has been a price fluctuation on the downside for this particular stock. So this entire there is basically for mark to market feature, because owing to the mark to market feature, there's going to be a debiting to this account. So the first debiting happens to this excess account, so that's 5,500 plus the additional, because the total debiting has to be 8,000, so the additional 2,500 is going to come off this IMR, making it at 57,500 as the closing balance. Now with this 57,500, we have to also see where is our maintenance margin level. Well, this is at 40,000. So 57,500 is obviously more than 40,000, which means that the safety level or the maintenance margin level is not yet touched. Had it been touched, had it been so that it had touched here, then the long to the contract will have to make good from this 40,000 back to the 60,000. That means additional 20,000 he will have to immediately post, should there been a situation like that. But in this case, even after 3 days, the margin balance is positive in favor of the long to the contract. All right, so this is what is the first problem is all about. So let's drive to the second problem. A trader sells short 5,000 bushels of corn at the rate of $4.5 per bushel. The initial margin as demanded by the exchange is 2,500 and the maintenance margin is 1,250. Under what circumstances there will be a margin call to the short trader? Now again we will drop the same analogy as that of the water tank, but in this case we must understand that this is a short contract. Okay, the short contract would mean that if the price goes down, the short to the contract wins, but if the reverse happens, the short to the contract will lose. And if the price goes up and the margin posted by the short is insufficient, there is going to be a margin call in the same fashion as the previous problem, wherein we have already an initial margin and then it is at a safety level, there is an maintenance margin. So this is the maintenance margin level. So the moment the water body reaches here, as we know, there is going to be a call. Okay, so the same thing happens in case of a short. Whatever is applicable to long is applicable to short as well. So let's just solve the problem here. So the trader sells shorts 5,000 bushels of corn at the rate of $4.5 per bushel. So what is the value of this contract? So that's easy. That's 5,000 multiplied by 4.5. So that is around 22,000 US dollar. The IMR as demanded by the exchange is $2,500. So this particular water body, the entire length of it is around $2,500, and the maintenance margin has been kept at $1,250. It's at $1,250. Under what circumstances there will be a margin call to the short trader? All right, so the margin call to the short trader, as we have understood, is that when the price would rise in such a manner that the short initial margin account will be depleted. Okay, and once it starts depleting, it will reach this level. When it reaches this level, then there is going to be a margin call. So the value between the initial margin and that of the maintenance margin difference is 12,000, 1,250 USD, right? All right, so if this is 1,250 USD, and we are practically talking about 5,000 bushel of contract. So simply divide this 1,250 by 5,000. So that would be 1,250 divided by 5,000. So that's 0.25. So 0.25 US dollar. So if this particular bushel, which was at 4.5 US dollar to begin with, if this becomes 4.5 plus 0.25, that is 4.75, then there is going to be an immediate margin call to this particular account. All right, so that's how things actually are set here. I just solved it. So we're going to take up the last problem, and then that is going to be the end of our tutorial. And I'm sure that this is also going to make sense to you. Trader shorts, and this I've taken a direct reference from the Garb's book. And why I've taken it is because the hitherto most of the problems related to the maintenance margin account and the initial margin account revolved around the specific given dollar value. But because of the span margin that is being introduced, especially with the derivatives contracts world around, the initial margin requirement, which is pegged and is tied with the contract price itself, is no longer valid as in order to calculate the maintenance margin account. Of course, it does make sense to calculate the initial margin account tied it to the initial contract value, but subsequent changes in the underlying price in the market will have to be calculated on a percentage basis. So how it actually works out, let's just see this problem. So this, as I said, that I've taken a direct reference from the Garb's book. A trader shorts 100 shares when the price of the stock is around 50. All right. So he has shorted 100 shares. All right. So that is 50 into 100. So 100 number of shares. So that comes out to be 5,000. Okay. All right. So this many worth of shares have been shorted. The initial margin requirement and the maintenance margin requirement as decided at 150% and 125% respectively. All right, so the initial margin requirement will be 150% of the contract value, which means it is going to be 5,000 into 1.5 times, which comes out to be 7,500. So this is the initial margin that the short seller must actually post with the exchange. And then the maintenance margin has been pegged at 125%. So which means basically this is 5,000 into yeah. So it's 5,000 going to be into 1.25. No, this is not the case because this is given in percentage. So this is going to be at one given point in time when the price of this contract becomes X. The X is 1.25 times or 125% should be the maintenance margin. That's what it's been actually inferred as. So what is the dollar value of the IMR and how high can the share price go before the margin call is initiated? All right. So let's just see that the dollar value of the IMR is, of course, the dollar value of the contract is 5,000, as we have worked out already, and the initial margin requirement is 7,500. All right. Now, what it is being talked about is that it's 125% of something is where the maintenance margin has been pegged. So if you just equate this, so this is basically X into 1.25, this becomes a 7,500, then X is equal to 7,500 divided by 1.25. And if you do this math, the X value comes out to be 6,000. Okay, so that would mean that for 100 shares, since we were talked about, so on a per share basis, the price is basically 60. So if the price of this particular security crosses beyond a 60, if the stock price at any given point in time crosses beyond 60, there will be a margin call. That's what is being. Now the moot point out here is that how do we differentiate? So far we talked about in the previous two examples, we took actually the dollar value, the absolute dollar value. And in this case, we are actually dealing with percentage. And we are talking about that this maintenance margin of 125% is not based on the initial value. See, if the initial value was 5,000 and then the initial margin becomes 7,500, and owing to this calculation, the 125% of 5,000 should have been 6,250, which makes that the price of the security, underlying security, when it crosses 62.5 touches 62.5 or crosses 62.5, there should be a margin call that should be initiated. But as we see that this is a new norm which has coming in, and GARP also tests this way because of the span margin that is being implemented world over. So the initial margin of 150%, whenever you're encountering any problem in your actual exam, which involves the percentage calculation of the initial margin and the maintenance margins, always to remember that the initial margin is closely tied with the contract price itself. The contract price is at 50, so it is closely tied with the initial margin itself. However, the maintenance margin is not tied with the initial contract value, unlike the dollar value problems that we have solved earlier. So the maintenance margin is expressed in a percentage basis. So you have to calculate exactly in this fashion, that what percentage of that what has been given actually is going to be equivalent to the initial margin requirement as we worked out here. Okay, so that's how the problem you should differentiate. If it's given in a dollar value, you should follow this way of doing the things. Then we take the absolute dollar value here, we take the absolute dollar value here, we calculate the difference, and then we see that where it is actually touching the maintenance margin, and then accordingly we'll fill it up. But if it's given in percentage, this is exactly how you should be doing it. Also, what if the IMR was set at a dollar value of 3,000 and the IMR at 2,000? See what I'm trying to say? And at what price of the stock the margin call be initiated for the stock price? So let's just do it in this fashion as well, in order for us to understand it better. Okay, so what it says is that also, what if the IMR, so I'm again now going to draw the water bucket or the water column. So it says that if the initial margin is equal to $3,000, okay, and the MMR, that is the maintenance margin, is set somewhere around here, which is $2,000. Now here we are talking about dollar value. So initially we know that the price of the security when it was initiated was at 50. So fine. So the difference between the two, so the IMR minus the MMR, is equal to $1,000. The price of the security, and how many securities were there? So we are dealing with 100 shares. So basically on a per share basis, it becomes 1,000 divided by 100, which comes out to be 10. So that means the initial price of the security was 50, and remember he had shorted the contract. So if the price goes up to 60, so 50 plus 60, if it goes to 60, then the short trader will face the margin call. Okay, so this is how you are going to work out if it is given on a dollar absolute scale, and this is how you will work out if it is given in a percentage scale. So that is all there is to it. I think that the vast tutorial that I made with the examples given on the initial margin requirement and the maintenance margin requirement, the difference between the two, as well as the variation margin requirement and the water bucket structure, the water tank structure that I made, this might have made sense, and you should not face any problem in solving these. You should not face any problem in solving these queries. Thank you very much.